And we're back with the show. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here. The Pop Culture Cosmos. A good man returns, a man of true knowledge, a man indeed who is a great part of what's going on with the MCU's Bleeding Edge. Man who covers pop culture like very few others. It is Jeff Sloboda. And Jeff, good to have you back talking about The Acolyte on Disney Plus. It just ended its season one run, came with a couple of notes on the end, but I'm just going to say this out loud before we go into it, my friend. The numbers weren't good. The numbers are coming back from the early period of the show now on Nielsen ratings, and as far as the streaming numbers are concerned, I don't see The Acolyte anywhere near the top 10. No one seems to be getting a really good vibe as far as where it's lining up. There have been Hulu shows and Disney Plus shows that have actually garnered better ratings during that course of time when it first debuted and started to go one week after another. But I think The Acolyte and its storytelling leads to a larger problem with what's going on with Star Wars.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it definitely affects the series that come out afterwards. There's an impact there. It really, it takes the shine off of what comes out next. So, with the Skeleton Crew coming out in December, this already kind of throws shade, just like other Disney, Star Wars series have in the past too. We could debate what was, our top 10 or whatever of the Disney Star Wars series that they've dropped. But there's been some ones that haven't been very good. This one might have been the worst, The Acolyte, I think. Honestly, the reception on The Bleeding Edge from all the different creators that came on during the course of the 8 episodes of reviews that we did were all glowingly bad. No one really had anything good to say about it at all. It kind of, bounced back a little bit in the finale, I felt like. I rated it higher probably than I did a lot of the other episodes. But still, it was not good.
I will tell you this: the storytelling well, first of all, this takes place in the High Republic era, which is supposed to be far before even Star Wars Episode 1. And if that's the case, it was supposed to be able to tell a different side of what was going on with the Star Wars universe and hopefully develop some things that happened before the Skywalkers entered the fray. But yeah, it never really found its footing. I think some of it was based off the acting. Some of it was based off the narrative direction. It just was not good at all. I think episode 3 was the pendulum episode, how really bad this was. I think it really hit the low there. And when you're storytelling and you're trying to go ahead and create a narrative, the worst thing you can do is, if you understand what is the worst episode in the series, whatever you do, don't revisit it from a different standpoint later on in the season, which they did in episode 7. They basically showed you what happened in episode 3, except from a different point of view. And it didn't make it any better. So with that being said, my friend, yes, episode 8 might have given a little bit better glimpse of what they were trying to accomplish with the Acolyte. But by that time, I think a lot of people had just tuned out.
Yeah, it was, it was rough to go through it. It was a slog. I almost didn't like, this is rarely, I rarely say this, but I really, honestly, at the end, I did not want to cover it anymore. That's how bad it got. And you're right. The writing and the direction of the story seemed to be very, very much in disarray. Mm-hmm. And there was no footing or backing for a lot of the decision making that was being made by the characters in the show. Right, at times, some of the decision making that it made no sense. There was no backing for, like, why did the Beaver character or whatever rip out Soul's ship's, wiring or whatever, and like cause Soul's ship to go down in that last episode? That made no sense to me. I didn't get that. So it was really rough. It was tough to watch it. And really a low for Star Wars. I think like a real low. I mean, everyone's basically you know, has panned it roughly at this point. Everybody has for weeks. I mean, it's been beat to death. So how they can end up making another season, for instance, like a second season, I just don't see it. It was really bad.
I don't know if it's the worst of Star Wars because there's been a lot of bad Star Wars. The Last Jedi, Skywalker, The Last Skywalker. Those are terrible movies. Whatever you think about the prequels, I personally don't care for them. I think they're also pretty much garbage, and Hayden Christensen whining throughout. I really think that the Book of Sloboda Fett ruined the fascination that many people had with Boba Fett. So that's why I call it the Book of Sloboda Fett. When you try to solve his mystery about him and the Sarlacc pit within the first 10 minutes of the series, and then really it just, for everybody else, just kind of tuned it out at that point. Why do you want to watch the rest of the series if you already knew what happened?
It kind of Tusken Raiders.
Yeah.
The Tuskens.
Yeah. It just, that
the Tusken stuff was great. Come on. Can you tell me you didn't like the Tusken stuff?
No. Book of Sloboda Fett. There's a reason why I call it the Book of Sloboda Fett. The pacing on it was absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible with the Book of Boba Fett. But I will say there have been, even in Obi-Wan Kenobi, I mean, you already knew what's going to happen between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. So to have these two epic battles between them, it's like, you know what's going to happen. You're not going to change history. So you already know what's going to happen. So it really was going nowhere, a series going nowhere. I had
a tough time going through that, getting through that show.
Yeah, because you already know what's going to happen. You already know where it's going to lead to between those two. The only saving grace in the past few years, whether or not you like the Bad Batch or the Clone Wars or anything like that, is Star Wars Andor and how fantastic it is. Oh, yeah. And I've been on your show to go ahead and comment on how good that show is. And hopefully they'll make season 2, which they are just as good. In fact, have already probably finished shooting it, and they're probably going to show it sometime next year. But hopefully that will continue to go ahead and be the stellar show that it is. But at this point in time, Jeff, you're seeing, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know that recently Jamie Lee Curtis got raked over the coals from the internet because she commented on the MCU being bad, in a bad phase, and had to apologize. What the MCU leading into Deadpool and Wolverine was not in a very good place. I think that's her opinion. She deserves it to go ahead and say it, and rightly so. They had not had as many successes as they've had failures. Same thing with the Star Wars. However successful Ahsoka and The Mandalorian have been, there have been so many disappointments in recent years when it comes to what they're doing in Star Wars. So your thoughts with the failure of the Acolyte, because I don't think they'll bring it back, despite Darth Plagueis and also Yoda getting a gratuitous cameo before all is said and done. Your thoughts on where the Star Wars universe should go from here?
Those cameos were not effective. Like, no. They were not done well at all.
They're just thrown in. They're just thrown in.
Yeah, it was really sloppy, and it really didn't do anything for anybody. If anything, I think in the Star Wars fandom, it actually made people upset a little bit. If anything, I think a lot of people, at least from what I've seen on YouTube and whatnot, a lot of people really didn't like it. Them using those characters like that, like in such a poor way. But I digress. I just don't understand where all that money went. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know there's inflation and all that, and and I know that money. I know that $180 million budget, in 2024 is maybe different, than what it was, years prior. But still, that's a lot of money. It seems like that. I mean, Avengers, the first Avengers film, I think, didn't even cost $180 million. So, I mean, that's a lot of money. And I just don't see where it went. The set design was not good. It seemed like the costumes were not anything inspiring for me. Like, there was really no good to take from the Acolyte. really, at the end of the day. That's one thing about it. There was really nothing redeemable about it. There was nothing where you could like at least say, "Oh, well, this was done well." Episode 3 was terrible, but the ending of it, and then going into episode 4, some of the action stuff was probably the only highlight of the Acolyte. Was probably the some of the action stuff that they did in episode 7 too. I liked some of the action stuff that they did, some of the lightsaber battling and stuff like that.
I'll give them credit for that. I'll give them credit for that. The lightsaber battles were some of the more effective in the Star Wars universe, but it takes more than lightsaber battles to tell a story, my friend.
Yeah, the main character, the way that where they decided to go with the story, I think. I mean, you remember the Acolyte is something that we knew back in like 2020. This series was going to come out, right? Pardon me, and so this is not like this didn't just come out of nowhere. I'm surprised nobody stopped. That there was nobody other than I can't believe that there was nobody that stepped in to at any point say anything to the people who are making the Acolyte, like Leslie Headland, and just point out to them like, hey, this is not good, right? Like I can't believe during the editing process or something like that there was no, wanting to go back and try to fix anything. Kind of, does that make sense, Gerald? Like, yes. I'm surprised that they didn't do anything and that nobody ever at any point, that it managed to sail right through and get put out the way it was. I'm surprised that Disney kind of fell asleep on the wheel on that shit. Pardon my French.
Well, again, I just have some really disappointing thoughts when it comes to the Acolyte, and it does not look like. I mean, all signs are pointing to no return to the Acolyte or High Republic era, and that to me is concerning because the fact is, you set this all up for a arrival of Darth Plagueis. That's what basically this was going to center itself around on. I think if you're familiar with the High Republic era, you got to understand that, hey, this is about the fact that the Darth Plagueis tale. To me, it's that I guess when the story of Darth Plagueis was told, that is probably to me the best part of the prequels is the story of Darth Plagueis that's been told, and I think that in doing so, when Ian McDiarmid did spell that out, I think he just made it so palpable for audiences to go ahead and say, okay, when are we going to actually see Darth Plagueis part of the Star Wars universe being shown off? And the way they did it here, it just is disappointing. The way that they gratuitously put that in to a series that probably no one will end up watching, figuratively, of course. But it just seems like it's disappointing end to the story of Darth Plagueis. And I'm hoping they'll revisit it at some point down the line, maybe. But even if they don't, what are you going to do? At this point, the Star Wars universe is in a lot of disarray.
Well, I guess my main concern overall would probably be that, how does this affect their ability to craft films or TV series that are set in other eras of the Star Wars timeline in the future, mm-hmm. with how badly this was received, right? And this being set in the High Republic, I just wonder if that will inhibit them from wanting to reach out and break away from the original Star Wars trilogy mold and the original characters more, which I think is necessary kind of in a way, isn't it? For them to kind of grow continue to grow the brand and keep the whole thing alive. At some point, they have to break away from the Skywalker deal. Is my point mainly, And I worry that with that much money being spent, that it might be tough now to see them make it something else down the road that breaks away from that template.
Again, if there's any story I'd like to see, it is Darth Plagueis. But you know what? I think, as I said to Josh Peterson on the show before, I think that maybe it is just even better to go ahead and move on from the Skywalker universe and just go into a different galaxy far, far away and just move on from all of this. But I understand that they are going to go ahead and create this Mandalorian Ahsoka tale and finish that off, and it's been pretty good for the most part. Season 3 was up and down as far as the Mandalorian is concerned, but I still think it's probably some of the best or better Star Wars that they can put out there at this point in time. And Ahsoka was pretty solid, but I think ultimately they're going to have to make a decision to move on from the Skywalker universe, because I just think right now you're getting somewhat good, but a whole lot of bad.
Yeah, I think that Ahsoka will get a second season, a final season, and I think that they'll do one more season of the Mandalorian, and you'll get the Grogu Mando film, and that will be it. I think for that chapter of Star Wars, that will be the end of that. Whatever you want to call that Mandoverse, I guess. I think that will be pretty much the end of it. And of course, Andor only has that one last season. And that's it that we're looking forward to. That's the end of Andor after that. So you wonder what direction they're going to go in from there. They kind of puts them in a position where Disney Star Wars is kind of at a clean slate kind of deal, to where if they wanted to go in a different direction, this would be the time to do it. But we're still a ways away from them. I don't know when that fourth season of The Mandalorian will come out. Right? Obviously, the protagonist, the actor that plays the protagonist, has a lot on his plate. So, luckily it's all under Disney, right? For the most part. Mm-hmm. So that, I guess that works. But overall, yeah, there's been some interesting and some exciting stuff that's gone on lately. But the Acolyte, and watching it get beat up every day on YouTube and on social media and everything, was something else. I mean, I'm talking about getting shredded.
Is this the worst Star Wars has put out there, in your opinion, in quite some time? Because again, we talked about it. When I can name several on my list in the past decade that has been out there as far as what has been perceived. I mean, Solo, a Star Wars story, you could probably throw in there, especially that first 10 minutes is some of the worst of Star Wars filmmaking. Of course, The Last Jedi, and then, of course, also as well, The Last Skywalker. Those are two absolutely terrible movies. And then you have some of the series, which I mentioned before. What does Star Wars need to do to get a reset? Because this seems like we're seeing some of the worst Star Wars has to offer.
I don't know what the answers are. I don't. I mean, I'm new to the Star Wars fandom. It was Andor when the Andor came out, Rogue One and Andor, that really hooked me into Star Wars. Especially covering Andor. Luckily you got to experience one of my first times ever, like getting out of the house and trying to do a show on a hotel room. I think it might have been on an Andor recap show or something like that, where my internet was just terrible at the hotel and it wouldn't work. That was not a good show, but no, I don't have answers. All I can really honestly say is that The Acolyte is the worst thing I've ever seen from Star Wars. It's absolutely dreadful. I would not want to rewatch it. I mean, I really would not want to. I don't see any reason why I ever will. I don't have any plans to. I don't want to. I had a tough time finishing it. I really did not want to watch the final 2 episodes, probably. I pretty much did not want to watch it anymore. There's other stuff to watch. I watch enough stuff as it is. So it's like, this was the worst. It's not fun, especially when you do a show like I do, where people come on and, you're relying on the human connection and, all that while we're live on our shows and the conversation and whatnot to entertain people. There was nothing entertaining about covering The Acolyte at all. It was everyone's opinions were bad. And it overall, that kind of vibe that that comes off of The Acolyte, it's not fun. That sort of that overall feeling from the whole show when you got 7 people on and everyone hates what you're watching. It's just not fun. It's not fun, and that's why The Acolyte was so critically not well received, regardless of what the Rotten Tomatoes ratings say or anything like that. This show was not. It's not. Everyone considers it like the worst Star Wars, I think.
Is this a sign of a bigger problem for Star Wars? And it's where they're usually given a pass because it's Star Wars, no matter how bad the product has been over the course of the past, I don't know, let's say 30 years per se, since episode 1 came out. And that came out to such great anticipation, such great excitement, and in many cases, for many people out there, myself included, great disappointment. Over the years, though, again, Star Wars has been given reprieve after reprieve after reprieve because of the fact of the two words Star Wars. I still enjoy Star Wars. I can still go to an experience as far as Rise of the Resistance, is the best ride I've ever been on at a theme park anywhere on this planet. And that's Star Wars based. So Star Wars can still thrill and excite when it needs to. But again, it comes right back to the Acolyte, and that means declining numbers for Disney and Disney Plus. These budgets don't get any cheaper. These budgets don't go any lower. They usually go
No,
higher when it comes to Star Wars. So with that said, what should the expectations be for Star Wars going forward?
it's tough to say because they're kind of in a quarter. Right after they're reeling that after the Acolyte. That, I mean, they basically wasted that money for nothing almost. I mean, it certainly did not help the platform at all. I think. I mean, you're right. Andor cost a lot of money. It wasn't made on the cheap. Like if anybody who believes that Andor was really good and cheap, they don't know what they're talking about because Andor was very expensive to make, and I'm sure Andor season 2 will be very expensive to make. People may not realize that, but it did cost a lot of money to make Andor.
Yeah.
So same thing with Rogue One. The films aren't cheap either. But I think that I don't want to say that they're at a point where that they have to kind of push a reset, but they kind of have to when you lay things out the way I already did. The Acolyte is a really big disappointment for Star Wars. It's a big, Star Wars is not they're even with Marvel's slip ups recently with Phase 4 and Phase 5. They still have a track record of one where people there's still hope, there's still optimism with the MCU, right? That's still there in a way because you still believe that Marvel Studios can bounce back, right? At least I do. So and I believe there's a lot of people out there that still do. With Star Wars, I believe that the Star Wars fandom, if I'm correct, is past that point now, like to where they're really fed up with especially some of the political stuff. Some of the really toxic stuff that went down with the Acolyte behind the scenes, right? Involving, people in the cast, involving Leslie Headland. Some of the things they said did not help the show at all. Some of the things that were said during interviews and things like that about it being the gay Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. I don't think the fandom wants to hear that. I don't think they like that. I don't think they like the idea that you're some kind of like toxic, white male or whatever, if you don't like the Acolyte, right? Or if you didn't like Ahsoka. Look, if there's people who didn't like Ahsoka, I like Ahsoka, but there's things in Ahsoka, flaws in Ahsoka, season 1, that I could point out myself where I could say, understand if somebody didn't like Ahsoka, right? I wasn't happy with some of the elements that they brought in from Rebels into the series. I felt like it kind of overshadowed Ahsoka in their own show. In anything in the first season. I hope they rectify that in the second season. But as far as speculation on my part regarding the future of Disney Star Wars, all I can honestly say is just that they can't afford to spend that much money and have no return on it like that with the Acolyte. They just can't. They can't afford it. Nobody can. There's no one. No one has money forever to just be able to spend it and get no output from it. I'd be interested in seeing how Disney Plus is doing in terms of new subscribers to Disney Plus in the last year or so. How they've been doing with things like that. I don't think very well. They need to make changes, and definitely, obviously, I think there needs to be some oversight of Kathleen Kennedy in terms of what she greenlights and they just put out, and that's pretty much all I have to say, Gerald.
Well, with that said, my friend, it is, of course, Star Wars: The Acolyte. It has not been the new series for Disney Plus that they could rely on going forward as far as creating a whole new universe on another part of the Star Wars timeline. Again, I know I've said my comments as far as I'm thinking the best course of action will be ultimately if they go into another galaxy far, far away and create something fresh. But I think one last story they could tell that they haven't told in any degree on medium as far as television or film is the story of Darth Plagueis, which again, it just has been only outlined by Ian McDiarmid during the prequels. I would love to see them go there before they go ahead into a universe or galaxy far, far away. So I'm hoping that the Star Wars universe finds better footing next time around. The next time around will be Skeleton Crew, but I don't have high hopes for that. I think Star Trek recently made The Prodigy, which is, I believe, now on Netflix. It's actually doing decent numbers there, but it was meant more for a younger audience to try and bring younger audiences in to try and get them more into Star Trek. It's actually received very well. And still, though, Paramount Plus pulled the plug on it. Skeleton Crew reminds me a little bit of that as far as Jude Law and a band of youngsters finding another part of the Ahsoka verse, I'll call it, as far as finding trouble or finding adventure in the Star Wars universe there. Do you have any hopes for Star Wars Skeleton Crew coming off the disappointment of the Acolyte before we head on out?
It's tough to say because there hasn't been any type of teaser or anything like that at all to
The
work with.
D23 is coming up, I believe, so maybe they'll show it there.
Maybe, but based off of what I've heard so far, I'm especially coming off the Acolyte. I think there's going to be probably more disdain for the idea that you just flushed out with the kids, and more of a pushing for a younger audience lean with the show. I think there's going to be more of a reception, less of a well received audience to that type of show after the Acolyte, especially, if that makes sense. I think that the Acolyte's going to kind of, like I said, it's going to take some shine off of it. It's unfortunately going in the direction they went with it. If it's too farcical at all, if there's a sense that it is, I don't think it will be well received. No.
Well, we will have to wait and see how much love Disney continues to give to the Star Wars universe. I still say that they will continue to give it the kind of love that they want to give it. It's not necessarily the kind of love that they need to give it, but we will see more stories in the Star Wars universe yet to come. But before we head on out, Jeff Sloboda, the man of true knowledge, you've got to give us an update on what's going on with the MCU's bleeding edge, and why is it bleeding so much on the MCU's bleeding edge?
Well, the House of the Dragon finale, obviously, on Monday night. Well, it's coming out on Sunday night, but on Monday night, we're covering it on the bleeding edge at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on our YouTube channel and on Rumble and Facebook Live and Twitch and X, Twitter, everything, all the major platforms. I believe besides that, we are starting the week after that the new Batman King Crusader show that we're going to do. Knock out a couple episodes per show until we get into the Penguin. But we got the Penguin coming up on the horizon. Looking forward to that. That seems exciting so far. I like the trailers. Digging that. We got the second season of the Lord of the Rings. The Rings of Power. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I mean, that you know as well as I do, Gerald. And we can talk about that when we finish it. The season one was a little bit up and down, right? But we'll be covering that here at the end of the month, episodically, like we do most of our shows. And besides that, Gerald, that's pretty much it. We wrapped up the Acolyte recently. Thank God, that's over. So honestly, I'm a little bit standoffish as to whether we'll cover Skeleton Crew in December, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's my kind of show, to tell you the truth. There's other stuff to cover. We're covering the new Dune TV series on HBO at the end of the year. That should be good. Dune Messiah, looking forward to that. Besides that, I think that's pretty much it, Gerald.
Once again, it is the MCU's bleeding edge. Please go ahead and check out the man of true knowledge, Jeff Sloboda, as he goes ahead and talks about the world of pop culture right there on the MCU's bleeding edge on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Jeff, as always, it's great to have you back on. I couldn't thank you enough. Whenever you decide to stop on by, whenever, if you want to talk about, of course, Star Wars, Marvel, any kind of pop culture, you're always welcome to stop on by. I know if I get the itch, I'm going to head back to the MCU's Bleeding Edge and make sure that you guys get some word from all of us here at the Pop Culture Cosmos.